I finally did it. I finally decided to play this game. After many years of just not being interested in playing Ultra Despair Girls, I finally completed it. And I think it's important to lay out some ground rules for this review. First of all, I'm not going to be talking about V3 or Danganronpa 3 the anime in this review, so if you haven't played or watched those, you can stay for this review. Second, this is a spoiler review, but if you are a Danganronpa fan who hasn't played this game, and you just want a recommendation, I think this game's worth it. I think it adds a lot to Danganronpa's overarching story, but I can't promise you'll enjoy this game, so keep that in mind. Also, I've watched the Danganronpa 3 anime quite a while ago, but I tried going into the game with the mindset that I didn't see anything in Danganronpa 3, so keep that in mind. Lastly, I decided for any review of games, I'm gonna give them a score out of 10. So at the end of the review, you'll see what score I give to Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls. Now, first things first, why did it take me a long time to play Ultra Despair Girls? Well, two reasons. One, it was much different compared to the main series games. It's a third-person shooter game, and that was something new to me, so I just assumed I wouldn't enjoy it. Let's start with what was different about this game, the gameplay. I was actually completely okay with it. There's enough things to mix up the gameplay. You have your normal combat sections where you're shooting at Monokumas. You have the Monokuma machines, which are puzzles where you have to kill all the Monokumas in one hit with the designated truth bullets. You also got regular puzzles. It's kind of like 999 where you just find some clues within a room and put them together to find the correct code for the laptop. And for the most part, I like all of these sections. Now personally, I do think I would like a little more of the regular puzzles and a little bit less of the combat section and Monokuma machines, because I really do think the puzzle sections were underused. Now let's talk about difficulty. If you're someone who values difficulty in your games, you probably won't like the main combat sections of the game because they're fairly easy. You also have Genocider Show to make the game just infinitely easier, so yeah. Personally, the difficulty didn't bother me too much because I just wanted to progress with the main story, but yeah, don't expect too much of a challenge. However, there is a greater challenge in this game, and these challenges are the Monokuma machine puzzles I was talking about earlier. You really have to think about how to approach these, and I really did find these tricky. Something else that's actually surprisingly fun is finding the hidden kids. This is like finding the 5 hidden Monokumas in each chapter for the main games, but for some reason, it's really hard in this game. I don't know where they were hiding these kids, but it feels very rewarding when you do spot one. Now let's talk about the characters. Immediately, I loved Kamaru. In the very first scene of the game, she talks about how she doesn't really know the shape of the earth, and it could be anything since she hasn't seen it for herself. People have told her the shape of the earth is a spear, but she can never confirm it for herself. I just liked her take on the idea that if you haven't confirmed it for yourself, you don't really know. But it's not just that scene. Kamaru is a great protag throughout. I really enjoyed seeing her go from someone who was scared of fighting to someone who willingly chose to stay in Toa and protect everyone at the end of the game. Toko is also great. With Toko, we get to see how the first Killing game changed her. She still has the same weird traits she had during the first game, which I enjoyed, but she also has new things to her character. One key change with Toko is her willingness to change and take risks. This is something she saw in Makoto, and this is something that Kyoko taught to Makoto, so it's pretty cool to see this chain reaction spreading from character to character. Other ways she tries to change is trying to move past her phobias. She has a fear of blood, and yet, she doesn't stay locked up in Future Foundation's headquarters. No, she moves around the city, which is filled with bloodshed everywhere. But it's not just their changes throughout the story I like. I feel like I got to know Kamaru and Toko more than any of the other Danganronpa characters. Some of this is due to the mandatory conversations, which explain things such as Toko getting locked up in a closet for days, which made her scared of the dark. But there are also some collectibles, which can really change your experience with the game. There are a lot of books you can find throughout the game, and these were all just fun additional dialogue that made me like both of these characters even more. Like for most Danganronpa characters, I know things about them. I can kind of picture how a day in the life of a character would be. But with Kamaru and Toko, I feel like I can accurately describe a day in their life from morning to night just because you learn so much about them. We learn things like what Kamaru's favorite mangas are, how she idolizes Sayaka, more of Toko's haunting past, and her dislike for manga and light novels. I know these collectibles aren't exactly the same as free time events, but I actually think they're a much better way of adding to a character. With free time, there's a lot of continuity issues, and it can interfere with the main story. With these books, it just feels like an add-on to both Kamaru and Toko's characters. Never do these segments take away from the main story. You can collect all of them in your first playthrough, and they feel rewarding. Now, there are some things about Kamaru and Toko's dynamic I don't like. One thing I didn't like was how many times they mentioned that Kamaru changed throughout the game. Like, they just kept putting it in our faces. They're like, oh wow, look, Kamaru's changed. Guys, look, Kamaru has changed. She went through a huge change. And I'm like, okay, come on, you don't have to keep telling us this. Like, we know, it's pretty obvious. We can see it from the actions. You don't have to tell us. So that kind of annoyed me. It was just, I don't know, they did it way too much. Then, I don't know, this isn't too bad, but like, there are a lot of cheesy moments in the game, especially between Kamaru and Toko. And it was like, sometimes they're okay, like when it needed to hit, like, you know, the final shot with Big Bang Monokuma, or that Nagito moment, the Nagito confrontation. Like, I love those, but there are some times where I'm just like, let's just stop with all this friend stuff. I don't know, I don't take it as well as other people, I don't think. Thankfully, there are a lot of moments where, you know, they'll just make a joke and cut that whole thing off. So it's okay, it's not too bad. Alright, that's enough about our pro tags. But what about the other characters? Let's start with Shirokuma and Kurokuma. I really don't have to say much about them. Honestly, I liked Shirokuma. He helped us out for a while until he became the final boss. He was funny while he was with the party, and I really liked his walking noises. Kurokuma, on the other hand, he just feels like he didn't need to be in the game. Honestly, the guy barely gets any screen time, and he has his funny moments, but overall I just have nothing to say about him. And then we have 3 family members of the characters from the first game. Let's start with Hiroko, Yasuhiro's mom. She's pretty cool and indirectly gives us a little bit of insight on Yasuhiro's life, but the main thing with her is that she's trying to save all the people with the Monokuma bracelets. These lead to some pretty interesting conversations about relatives or companions of the characters from the first game. These sections are funny and interesting because we share the same perspective of Toko, who knows the DR1 students, and then we got Kamaru, who is clueless. Then we got Chihiro's dad, who sadly dies right away. I don't know why they killed him off so fast, but that was tragic and it left me very, very sad. But there was one other death that left me even more sad, and that was Aoi's brother's death. Now, I don't know what it was, but I love the chemistry between these 3 characters right here. It was fun seeing Yuta do the same thing as Aoi when he wrote down Kamaru's name on his hand 3 times. And again, Toko knowing that this is Aoi's brother makes these conversations even more interesting. Sadly, this only lasts about 10 minutes, and Yuta dies. Never was I so sad about a character that I barely knew, and I think a lot of it just comes down to knowing Aoi. Once Yuta died, I was just sad because Aoi could have had a happy reunion with her brother, but now that's not possible, and it's up to Toko to break the news. Then we got the Warriors of Hope, and oh man, I really did like all of these guys by the end. I've seen a lot of tier lists of these guys being in C and D tier, without really understanding why, but after playing the game, I really do like them more than that. Even the ones that didn't get as much screen time had some sad backstories, and I could really buy the fact that they started killing adults due to the trauma they went through. Now, I don't really want to go through their backstories just because there are a lot of messed up things in there. There's also the servant, who's actually more plot relevant than I thought he would be, and he basically tells us that this game takes place between Danganronpa 1 and Danganronpa 2. So he's a pretty good addition. And oh yeah, we also have Haiji. Yeah. And last but not least, we have the story. But first, let's talk about the atmosphere of the game, because in my opinion, Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls has the best atmosphere of all 4 games. The game does a really good job of showing us how horrific the outside world really is. Everyone in the outside world is just scared. People are going insane, there are bodies at every corner, Monokumas are coming at you from every corner. You know how Junko kept saying the outside world was worse than being trapped inside the school in the first game? This is the game that made me believe this just because of everything I saw. Now let's get into the main story. In the early game, Kamaru's goal is to escape Towa City, and Toko's goal is to save Byakuya. Kamaru's goal changes quickly when she realizes that she will die even if she tries to escape, so she sticks with Toko and goes along with the Warrior of Hope's games. I will say there are times when I feel like the game just drags on during certain sections. I wish I could pinpoint the exact places where I thought the pacing was off, but sadly I wasn't taking notes or anything while playing. I will say though, the story kept getting better as the game went on, and Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 were standouts. Figuring out that Toko was just using Kamaru the whole time, but then actually ended up saving her was really cool. And oh boy, Chapter 5 is something else. Let's start with the one thing I really disliked about Chapter 5, and it was Kamaru talking with the ghost. Like this is actually canon now, and it just leaves you wondering what else the Danganronpa world can do. I get that it's supposed to be funny, but I don't know, for me it was just a lazy way to push the story. And hey, if there are ghosts in this world, like, you can do anything with this world basically, right? It feels like there's no limit. There are many other ways it could have been done, but everything after that was awesome. Yes, Monika's goal is just to create a successor for Junko, and for Danganronpa, this is fairly normal. But I love the execution of this final confrontation. We get the remote control, and we have the option to break the controller or to not break it. Some people probably find this section annoying, but I really enjoyed it. You have almost everyone pressuring you to break the controller, and if you fall for that pressure, you kill all the children and get a bad ending, which was really cool to see. Kamaru also falls into despair after seeing her parents die, and it's Toko's turn to snap her out of it. In the end, I like how not a lot changed with the ending. What we expect is to save all the adults from the Monokumas, because that was what we were trying to do the whole time. But no, instead, Kamaru and Toko never break the controller, and they continue fighting Monokumas in Towa City. This is a satisfying conclusion for both characters, because in the beginning of this game, there's no way either of them would actually choose to help everyone in the city, and honestly, I think this is my favorite ending out of all of the Danganronpa games. It just makes you feel really happy. Toko and Kamaru are killing Monokumas like normal, Byakuya saved, and he's fighting with Mikoto for just a little while longer. I will say though, it is still a little hard for me to wrap my head around Monika's plan, and what was required to make it happen. I mean, Kamaru had to survive everything, and make certain decisions such as not leaving the city in order for Monika's main plan to work, but I guess even if Kamaru left, it really wouldn't be too bad for Monika. Like, her main plan would fail, but she still has control over the city, so I guess it's not too bad. It's a little hard to catch every plot point with only one playthrough, but from what I got with my first playthrough, I really enjoyed the game's story. Now, before giving this game a score, I want to quickly summarize what I thought were the strong points and the weak points of the game. For me, this game has 3 strong points. The atmosphere, which in my opinion is either the best in the series or tied with Trigger Happy Havoc. In the main killing games, you get to see people go insane, but never does it get as insane as some of the random adults you see on the streets of Towa City. Second, we got the characters. In my opinion, Kamaru and Toko are the 2 strongest characters in all of Danganronpa. I'm not kidding, like, these are my 2 favorite characters now, which is insane. I never expected this, but they are. And honestly, the Warriors of Hope are pretty good too. Again, Masaru and Jotaro could have gotten a bit more, but I think the other 3 were well done. The story might also be my favorite. I'm not lying. Again, I think it's tied with Trigger Happy Havoc. I think I might give this over Trigger Happy Havoc. I'm actually not sure, but I just loved it throughout. But honestly, Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 are what carried the story for me. That section where we encounter Nagito, the parts with Nagisa, and then all of Chapter 5, that final confrontation, I just love that section so much. Now, with all this being said, this seems like my favorite game. I mean, look at all the praise I gave it. I said it has the best atmosphere. The two protagonists are my favorite characters in the whole series. That's big, that's huge. And then this game might also have my favorite story. Like, I'm making this sound like the best game I've ever played. Now, while I do enjoy all of these elements, I think there are two things that drag this game down for me. First is the pacing. A lot of the good story comes in at the last two chapters of the game, so the first three chapters feel just a little more bland in comparison. I actually really like the beginning of chapter 1. I think the first half of chapter 1 was good. The prologue as well, where we got introduced to Kamaru and Toko and how we see their dynamics at the start. I think that was really fun. But I think the latter half of chapter 1 and chapter 2 is sort of where the game got a little bit boring. Even though there's always a goal and we'd go to a certain place with the goal in mind, I don't know, it just wasn't too fun for me. It was just go from point A to point B so we can escape, but I don't know, it wasn't that fun. Actually, chapter 3 was great. Chapter 2 is, I think, where it was very slow. Chapter 3, a lot of good stuff started to happen. And then chapter 4 and chapter 5 took the game to another level. Second is the gameplay. While I do find the gameplay to be good overall, in my opinion, it is the weakest part of this game. I just thought there were some sections of the game where the combat sections could drag on, and sometimes it feels like there's too many mono machines to get through. Like when I get to a trial portion in a main Danganronpa game, I'm never disappointed that a trial is about to come up. But sometimes in this game, when I got to a mono machine, I was a bit disappointed. I was like, oh man, we have to do this again. You know, I had moments like that where I didn't want to do it. So that's gonna lower the score for this game by a bit. Then there's also the boss fights, and these mostly all just feel the same. You're basically just gonna be running around, dodging attacks, and counter attack based on what truth bullet you recently got. The only fights that feel somewhat different are the Nagisa fight and the final fight with Big Bang Monokuma. But even those are kind of underwhelming, to be honest. Overall, I'm really happy I played this game, and I was wrong to quickly dismiss it just because it was different from the main series games. The game answers some huge questions in the series. We learn how Monokumas were produced, and we get a bigger picture of how the tragedy even started. Now, I would have given this game an 8 out of 10, but after the amazing finale, I had to bump up the score, so therefore, I give this game an 8.5 out of 10. Honestly, I could go on about this game for much longer than I already did. And honestly, I wouldn't mind talking about this game more. There's so much about Kamaru and Toko that I can talk about, but this video is just going to go on for too long, and I don't think anyone wants a super long video. I'll just leave you guys with this. We don't know what the next Danganronpa game will be, and if it's UDG 2, I'll happily take it after seeing what this game has to offer.